because no one explained it to you before now, and somebody absolutely needs to. Greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world, and welcome back to the home, the haven, the stronghold, and the super fortress of intelligent Black thought. At this time in history, we need it now more than ever. This is the BlackChannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. You know, it is always, as I've stated before, it is a prophet's hope to be wrong. A prophet does not hope that he will be right, because what makes a prophet is usually because he's the person telling everybody that the good times are going to end. Everybody else believes the good times are going to last forever. He is the one telling you that the good times are going to end. That makes him extremely unpopular, but it also makes him extremely crucial. Years ago, I had predicted everything that was going to happen. I had stated everything that was going to occur, and right down the line, they've been happening. I can't even tell you that they picked up steam, because they haven't. If you've been listening to this broadcast, you've been hearing about this now for half a decade. Long before these things ever even started occurring, you've been hearing that, by the way, this is what's next. And when we said next, we meant it's coming right now. Well, here it is. The Black Channel was the only place that was told you that you were about to see a sharp upswing in the number of white folk on television and media and entertainment and everywhere expressing white supremacist views. Blatant, outright white supremacist views, calling you nigger to your face. That you were going to see a sharp upswing in that. And that is exactly what we witnessed happening. I did a YouTube video about it, the white woman nigger rampage. Nobody else had told you that, by the way, this is getting ready to happen. This is the only place that did tell you that. This is the only place that told you that you were about to see a sharp upswing in the murders of unarmed black men. And soon after that, black women. Well, didn't even make it 365 days before that started happening. And we were the only place that told you where and when it was going to occur. Now we're seeing it. But can you believe it? There are still plenty of black folk in denial. Still plenty of black people running around here trying to figure out, is there some way they can dance a jig and take themselves out of the crosshairs of white supremacy? They're still there. Still trying on new pairs of tap dancing shoes. Let me see if I can dance this jig hard enough, long enough. I'm just not interested in growing up and being a damn adult. Not interested at all. I told you all. I predicted right then. I called it when it happened. That when the NBA booted out Donald Sterling, I did say to everybody, you do understand what this means, don't you? That the removal of Donald Sterling, while everybody else out there was trying to focus on extraneous things, the Black Channel zeroed in like a laser beam on the most important aspect of the Donald Sterling affair. And the most important thing to keep in mind about that, I told you, was that, do you understand that if they are willing to knock off an owner because supposedly because of black folk, please, that doesn't even make sense. But if they're willing to do that, then do you know what that really means? What that really means is that they are about to declare open season on black males, that you have been running things for too damn long, or at least you've been too powerful and prominent and you're getting too uppity, that you think you can take down one of the slave masters. You've gotten too damn uppity. Now we're gonna do something about that. And that's exactly what they've done. I told you that that was going to make it open season on black males in pro sports, and now they've done it. In the last 7 days, they have had this. This is a concerted effort by the national media. It's a steady drumbeat. A steady drumbeat of trying to establish black males as the face of domestic violence. If they're so concerned about violence against women, you'd think they'd be talking about the police, but they're not talking about that. This is a concerted, conscious effort by the national white supremacist media, because they understand that they are losing the national debate of white supremacy. They're losing it. They thought to themselves that they could ignore us out of existence. And black people were talking about the events in Ferguson. There were riots going on in Ferguson. The national media ignored Ferguson for 3 days, people. Do you all remember that? When the riots in the uprising in Ferguson, Missouri first started, for the first 3 days, not 1, not 2, 3 days, the national white corporate media would not even mention Ferguson. They wouldn't even talk about what was going on. An American city on fire. And the national media would not even speak on it. Most of you had only heard about it through Tariq Nasheed and a few other people. But the national white media was trying to have a concerted, conscious media blackout. That they were not going to speak on that subject. That some folk out there may be talking about it, but their cameras and their airtime will not focus on this. How in the hell can you be a call yourselves national media outlets and you're not talking about a riot in America right outside of a major American city? For 3 days. 3 days, Facebook and Twitter and every place else is lit up about it. But these guys are sitting up here not saying anything? How in the world is that possible that you overlooked it and missed it for 3 straight days when it started? They were letting you know this is not what we're going to talk about. And it is only because black people stayed consistent and persistent and we were ignoring them and going after the news ourselves that all of a sudden they spun overnight and went to Ferguson. And when they went there, they tried to spin it and tried to turn the story into, oh, niggas on a rampage. That was what they tried to do. And then black people were again united and consistent and persistent. We were persistent in the matter. And because we wouldn't let it go, the national media were forced to follow up on it from our angle. They were forced to, not because they wanted to. Now understand, what they thought was that eventually at some point they were going to catch us in a moment of vulnerability. They thought that they were going to uncover some evidence that was going to make it clear that this nigger got what was coming to him. But the more they dug into it, the worse it got for the cop. They've even sunken to the putrid, disgusting level of trying to demonize the victim. We want to see his juvenile records. Isn't it amazing, though? When a black male commits a crime against a white person, they never want to see the white person's records. We want to see their criminal records. Nicole Brown Simpson, did they ever ask to see her criminal record? Did they ever ask to see her juvenile records? Did they ever ask to find out what crimes she was guilty of? I ask you. Did they ever ask that? Do they ever ask those questions where a white person is concerned? Did they ever look up Casey Anthony's criminal record? Natalie Holloway's criminal record? Lacey Peterson's criminal record? Do they ever ask those questions? When it's a black male, they ask it no matter what. That is the way that ethnic warfare through communication media works. That they already know who their targets are, and they simply create a narrative that dominates the target. That is the way that this works, people. They know what they're doing. This is a time-honored tradition. They know what they're doing. This is a formula that they've created, where you ignore events like Ferguson, something that is, they should be embarrassed that they were 3 days late. That should be shocking. There should be a national memorandum, a national forum about this to say, how in the hell did the national media wind up ignoring a riot in an American city for 3 straight days? The riot had to go on for 3 days before you guys even said anything about it. That should be something that should be cause for a national media gathering to find out what the hell happened. How the hell did you miss that? Because your local affiliates were trying to give you the feed and you were saying you didn't want it. Now, somebody is supposed to be getting fired at every single news outlet. CNN, MSNBC, Fox isn't a news outlet, but okay. ABC, CBS, they're supposed to be getting fired everywhere. Heads are supposed to be rolling all over that place. That is supposed to be a physical impossibility. That you missed a riot for 3 days. But NFL players, they're going back 6 and 7 months and a year, because they've got a formula now. We will now change the subject from white supremacy to black males. We interrupt the national focus on white supremacy to bring you black oppression, already in progress. That's what they're doing right now. How many of you missed that? How many of you realize that they didn't cover Ferguson for the first 3 days in which it happened, but now with black NFL players, the NFL season has started, and they didn't follow Donald Sterling like that? They didn't follow Donald Sterling like that. They didn't say that this is the end of the NBA. They didn't say, what is the NBA going to do to save itself? And the chief offender right now is Yahoo. And there is this world-class scumbag named Eric Adelson, who apparently is their designated hit piece writer. And this bastard, totally quiet about everything else, totally quiet, all of a sudden is going after every single story of this kind that he can possibly find. He's the guy who's been designated for that. didn't follow up on Donald Sterling, didn't follow up on Bruce Levinson, not following up to find out the other instances in the league. Because understand, Donald Sterling, it wasn't new that he was doing these things. He just got caught on tape this time. It wasn't new. But Adelson and the rest of the right-wing bigots in the media, they were not concerned about this. Why? Because this is the white supremacist agenda. They held these things in their back pockets. We'll just sit on this. We will sit on it. And when we just, it doesn't even matter if there's a disposition. Just yesterday, I was seeing a story about folk talking about Keyshawn Johnson. Well, the so-called domestic violence case against him, it was, he snatched the phone away from her, and she claimed that it cut her finger when he snatched the phone from her. That was domestic violence. Well, they threw the case out. The district attorney threw the case out. Can you believe that there were people talking about Keyshawn Johnson yesterday? Yes, it's true. This tells you just how far they're reaching. They give you no details about these things. They don't put anything into context. All they're going to say is another NFL player, domestic violence. Another NFL player, domestic violence. They put no context on it whatsoever. They never tell you what occurred. They never tell you what happened. They never explain to you what really happened. Because that's not the point. The point is the headline. Because they understand that most people's attention spans are so incredibly brief that they actually don't make it past the headline. The headline is the story for most people. Another NFL player, domestic violence. They make sure that they show. Have you ever seen so many stories that showed football players without their helmets on? They're showing the football players without their helmets. Story after story after story. They show them in their football uniform without their helmets on. They want to make sure that they link all three of those things. NFL, black man, domestic violence. NFL, black male, domestic violence. You see, this didn't work when they tried it with Richard Sherman. That didn't work because they tried it with him. They tried to demonize black males with him, and you see we ain't made it 6 damn months, and they're back again. This is a never-ending world war and jihad by white supremacy to get all of us. They're never gonna stop. This isn't going to end. They're just gonna keep reworking their formula and coming back after you under a new premise. But they are not gonna let this go. Not now, not ever. What you did to them in Ferguson and what it looks like, just the perception, even though we didn't actually do anything to Donald Sterling, just the perception that a white NBA Pro Sports League owner could be dethroned and chased out of the ring by black people who were upset about an issue that affected black people. Just the optics of it, just the visuals of that alone, that black people are powerful enough that we could dethrone a professional sports franchisee. Just the optics of that were so repugnant and repellent and offensive to them that they have wasted no time in exacting their revenge. Picked up their phones, call up Yahoo. Call up ESPN too while we're at it. Yeah, get them on the damn line. Yeah, hey. Yeah. This is Bill over here at the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. Just letting you know that, Adrian Peterson. Yeah, hey, this is Carl over here at the Ravens. Yeah. You know, Ray Rice had something happen back in February. And there's video of it, too, by the way. We can see about getting this leaked over there to TMZ. Yeah, you know, Dwyer is under a very heavy contract with us right now. He negotiated a very good deal with him. They're not telling y'all that about Dwyer with the Cardinals, by the way. The one they started talking about yesterday. They didn't tell you that about him, that he's got a very good contract. They haven't told you that all these black men that they're targeting negotiated very good contracts for themselves. Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, Dwyer, everybody else. These black men have gotten smart. They've started getting off the damn plantation. They're not giving you all their damn money. They negotiated good deals for themselves. And what do you know? Now, all of a sudden, you make these allegations, and oh, lo and behold, you freed yourself from these contracts, while making it appear that this was not financially related. Isn't that amazing? They pull out something from 6-7 months ago. It hadn't been a problem until this season. But now they've yanked this out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, this is supposed to have cosmic significance. And the first thing they tell you is, by the way, this violates our contract with you, so we're not really required to pay you. We're not required to pay you anything else here. Wow, that takes a burden off our shoulders, doesn't it? So many people out there right now are not understanding the way this works. So many of you do not understand that that is white supremacy. White supremacy has never been a social issue. So many people deaf, dumb, blind, and stupid because you are looking for some social issue. They don't like me because I'm black. They don't like me. They don't like me. They don't like me. Can I get them to like me? The goal of white supremacy is complete control of the society, and that starts and ends with the dollar. That starts and ends with the economy. And all of this is about destroying black men's ability to lead their people. Because without an economy, you cannot lead your people. And this is about disarming black people, and particularly black men, by way of removing our access to the economy. And that's what they're doing right now. We are going to find black males in the league and decimate them. This is important. Now, they've got to do a mass culling. There's a reason why this has got to be done in mass, brothers and sisters, because you only get one shot at this. They will only get one chance to trip black men up like this, because next season you won't be able to grab a bunch of black males like this anymore, because once you do one of these mass exterminations, one of these mass slaughters like this, next season you won't have any black males getting arrested for anything with domestic violence, because they're going to get these trashy, sloppy hood rat and trailer park hoes off of them, and then this won't be an issue next season, so they've got to grab as many of you as they can this season. They gotta get as many of you as they can now, trip as many of you up as they can now, and decapitate as many of you as they can now, because this weapon will not be usable next season. So they gotta get as many of you as they can, because this is a trap you can only spring once. Because black men will be wise to it by this. Hell, they're gonna be wise to it by this time next week. At this point, is there a black man in America who does not see that they're running a scam right now? And it's that female you sitting next to and laying up next to that you got to watch more than anything, because she is on the side of white supremacy. And black males as a group need to understand that we've been given a lot of leeway and we've been given a lot of access to females who are clearly exhibiting traits that show that they have preferential treatment to white supremacy. We've been playing a game with these females, and that has to stop, brothers. You cannot control a female who has given her allegiance to white supremacy. A female who says to herself that she is going to take the place of the plantation slave master, and that if she can't control you, she will call her friend white daddy to control you. And when you have a female who has that mindset and she gives you those little signs that she's on board with them, you cannot play the game that, well, my money will control her. Money controls economies. Money controls societies. But money will not control a female who has handed her allegiance to white supremacy, because the approval of white supremacy is worth more to her than money is. You cannot take economic control of someone for whom they have established something more valuable than money in their eyes. Economic leverage can only exist with someone who values economy more than something else or anything else. Where these females are concerned, little slutty hood rat attention. That Munchausen syndrome. Y'all want to talk about Stockholm syndrome, you need to check out Munchausen syndrome. Where a female, and we need to expand that beyond just children, because you focused on Munchausen with children so much, where a female will harm her children and take them to the hospital so she feels like she's getting attention for all this medical care being given to her children. All these people are sympathizing with her about her child. You all need to understand that what we're witnessing right now in the NFL is a modified version of Munchausen syndrome with these females, where they are harming the males and then soaking up all of the attention and the sympathy being showered on them by the society at will. You all don't understand the game. You don't understand the levels at which this is existing. Before tonight, you never heard the words NFL and Munchausen syndrome. I'm the person who is laying it out for you because you must understand this. And that is why you have seen it happen. You are seeing more of it happen. And if these brothers in the NFL and the NBA and everywhere else don't wake up, you will see even more of it occurring. Because you cannot give it a name, you can't fight it because you don't know what you're fighting. You do not know what you're fighting. You are fighting a situation where these whores and sluts consider attention to be more valuable than money and than life itself. And that they will do anything, resort to any tactic, make up any scam, pass off any fraud, and you are the sacrificial lamb for which that will occur. And in the cases of a lot of these NFL players, they made it very clear to these females that they were getting ready to be replaced. With Dwyer, that's what happened with him. He made it very clear to old gal, and you all should go see old girl too, by the way, that she was getting ready to be replaced. They have made it clear to these women, and once that happens, once she realizes that she will not get the attention that she was getting before, now she's going to start pulling out the cards. Ray Rice let that girl know with a left hook that you're not going to sit here and treat me like some boy on the plantation. You see, white supremacy understands that a white hand abusing a black male, that's too blatant. That's too blatant. You can't have some white male abusing a black man and people not see that for what it is. That's too blatant. So they've handed over the whip of abuse to black females and said, who among black female society is willing to sell their souls and sell out their people for our approval? Who is willing to do that? And you've seen a bunch of them throw their hands up. I'll do it for you, massa. I'll do it. He ain't buying me no red bottoms. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll take care of it for you, massa. I'll do it. I brought you all here together tonight because I wanted to have a talk with you about what you are seeing here. You are seeing the execution and implementation of a 21st century slave code. That's what we are witnessing right now. The slave code of the 20th century. I guess I should say slave codes, plural, of the 21st century. These are the slave codes. You see, white supremacy never stopped it. never stopped it. From 1441 to 1841 to 1941 to 2014. The formula and the mechanism has always been the same, and over time they've had to refine it, and then there was emancipation and they had to reconfigure it again, but they just found new ways of reconfiguring the oppressive tactics. But the end result of the oppressive tactics have always been the same. And you're going to start seeing recurring parallels. Now, I want to go over with you all tonight some of the old slave codes, because a lot of you are young people and you don't even know what the slave codes were. You see, in America, back when you had the colonial days, the 13 original colonies, they weren't even states. You had the 13 original colonies. And then from there, the states as they started developing. But from the colonies to the states, to keep control of their slaves, they started initiating what became known as slave codes. And even though each territory made their own code, basically as new territories started developing codes, they basically would just incorporate the codes. Their laws and codes were based on the codes of previous established slave codes in other states and other colonies. So you had this uniformity of slave codes across the Confederacy and across the slave-holding territories, because they based their slave codes on each other's slave codes. And they did this to establish dominance over black people, because the slave codes were not simply binding on slaves. Damn it, you need to wake the hell up. The slave codes were not simply binding on slaves. They were also binding on free blacks. The slave codes were also binding on free black people. And I'll explain that to you here in a moment. And as the federal government began cracking down on slavery and it began to go out of style, they replaced the slave codes with black codes, which essentially did the same things. New name, same outfit. Now, let's just go over some of the slave codes with you here, okay? Let's just go over a few of the slave codes so that you all will have some idea of what the slave codes were. Now, understand, I'm talking about codes here that go back 300 years. 400 years. 500 years. I'm talking about slave codes that go back to the 1700s and 1600s. Rules of engagement. Societal norms from Europe to America and other places. The West Indies. And I want you all to listen to these codes. And understand, these came from various places now. But tell me if any of this sounds familiar or applicable today, or starts to have eerie parallels to what you've seen occur. One of the chief slave codes was that no black person could accuse a white person of a crime. That was a slave code. As a slave, you could not accuse any white person of a crime. So do you know what that means? What that means is that nothing a white person did to you could be considered a crime. In other words, you have no reason to contact the authorities for any reason unless it is against another black person. But you can't contact the authorities, the courts, the government, anything. You cannot file a grievance of any kind against a white person. You are only able to exercise the authority of the power of government and the police state against a black person. You cannot do it against a white person. Only against a black person. Only against a black person. Only a black person. Ain't that right, Janae Rice? I'm being quiet for a moment because I kept repeating that over and over for you again because I wanted that to sink in when I said her name for you. Ain't that right, Janae Rice? With your sketchy past at best. You have never exercised power over a white person. You've never even dared to try it. She is a 21st century coon negress who is adhering to the slave codes, even in the 21st century. And she adheres to the slave codes. And she's not the only one. Ain't that right, Rihanna? They exercise no power over white people, never even attempt to do so. Never even try it. The only power that, I put power in quotations, the only power they have is over black people. That's the only power you have. Yeah, I know that hit close to home for a lot of you. But that's my job, is to put that in proper focus for you. The only power that a black person had, still has today, is power over other black people. They made that the law. So what does that do? That encourages you to be petty, to be small. You want to strike out at somebody, but you're powerless against massa, so you'll do massa's bidding. Well, I can't take out my anger against you, but if anybody else mess with me, I'll get them. Why don't you go get Massa? He too big and tough. I ain't gonna mess with him. But I'm gonna mess with Ray. Watch me hit him outside this elevator. I'm gonna hit him again. I'm gonna hit him again. And watch the coons line up. Watch the coons line up. One of the slave codes was that a black male could not, a slave, not just a black male, but a slave, any slave, male or female, you could not defend you could not raise your hand to a white person. Even in defense of yourself, you could not raise your hand to a white person. Even in defense of your own life, you couldn't do it. That was what the law said. Even if it was to defend your own life, you could not raise your hand to a white person. The only time that it was permissible to raise your hand to a white person was in defense of another white person's life. But you could not raise your hand to a white person in defense of your own or another black person's life. Only in the defense of your master. That is the only time it is permissible for a slave to defend himself. Or should I say to attack a white person. Only if you're doing it for the benefit of white people. That is all. I know Janae Rice and the rest of the coonesses of the NFL, they'll find that to be rather delicious. They'll actually find that to be absolutely delectable. They'll find that to be delicious. Definitely. Brothers and sisters, are any of these things these are slave codes from 400 years ago. Do they sound familiar? Do they sound familiar? That as a black person, you don't have the right to defend your own life, and anything that is done to you at any time can never be considered a crime. Oh, but this is all just coincidence, right? A black person couldn't travel without papers establishing their freedom. A black person, even if you now understand, these were the slave codes now. These were the slave codes. That if you were a slave, essentially though, this is if you were a black person though. Because understand, this one says if you're black. If you are black, you could not travel without papers establishing your freedom. That is, papers that stated you were free and not somebody's property. You could not travel freely if you did not have documentation that clearly stated you were free and not somebody's property. So, if you did not have proper identifying documents that stated you were not a slave, you were subject to being arrested. You can be arrested without proper ID. Ain't that right, Danielle Watts? Nobody else is going to run this down for you all tonight. I'm going down the list. I'm going down the names. We're connecting the dots for you, and a bunch of you still ain't going to get it, but I'm doing it anyway. You could not travel without proper documentation if you are black. 21st century, Danielle Watts sitting in handcuffs. You didn't show us any ID. That's not even legal, by the way. You don't have to give a police officer your identification. You don't even have to speak to them. Very, very much illegal. But they were establishing to you that the slave codes are in full effect. Nah, but you don't believe that. The other part of that particular statute, and this is one that you all need to listen to very closely, because it goes on. A black person can't travel without papers that certify that they are free. But furthermore, a black person, any black person, even a free one, somebody who was never born on a plantation, you could be interrogated at any time by any white person. Not just a police officer, not a constable, not a judge, by any white person who walked up to you at any time. They could demand to know your free status, and you were compelled to give them an answer. As a black person, you were obligated to give any white person proof of your identity as a free man. So what this did was this gave police powers to every white person over black people. Didn't give it to white people over other certain white people, but it gave police powers. It basically deputized every white person. It gave police powers to every single white citizen over black people. So when your 17-year-old son is walking home in the middle of the night and some white male has decided to deputize himself and ask your black son, "Hey nigga, where you going? What you doing round here? What's your name, boy?" "My name is Trayvon." "Where's your ID?" "Get away from me." I said, "Where's your ID, boy?" And you wonder where this mentality came from. It is not new. It has been passed down through the centuries. And you are just watching its manifestation today. This is not new. Yeah, you all didn't know that these slave codes were laid out like this centuries ago. Centuries. It's not new. Black people had curfews. The rise of the so-called sundown towns, which of course have always been implemented to control black people. Nobody else. And can you believe that we still got plenty of black folk today who will argue with you and tell you that there is nothing wrong with a curfew being put on black folk and not on white folk? I'm serious about what I just said. There's still plenty of black folk out there cooning to beat the band, talking about, well, why do you need to be out past 10 o'clock at night? I mean, why are you out there? If you ain't going to work, why are you out that late? What you doing out that late there? Why don't we do a curfew on the white side of town? Well, you know, they ain't causing no trouble like that on the white side of town. You find out who the coons are among us very quickly if you want to know. But once you have identified them, you are supposed to expose them. And you haven't done that. And that's why they feel free enough to keep raising their voices now. Because you have failed to expose them. But there's still black folk talking about, why we got to be out there late? You ought to be home anyway. You ought to be home anyway. The slave code stated that blacks were prohibited from assembling in a group unless one white person was present. That is what gave rise to the no loitering laws. Now, for years, a lot of you as children, you saw the words loitering. And you didn't actually know what that meant. You thought loitering was the same as littering. And it's not. Loitering simply means standing around in a group. Go look up the term loitering. That was implemented for us. Take a look at the legal term loitering and the application thereof. That was created and invented and implemented for us. For black men, that even after the slave codes were removed and the black codes were abolished and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were ratified and the removal of segregation, they still had laws on the books. You see, they can make a law for anything, and you can say it applies to the whole society, but as long as you have a majority white police force and a majority white judges in your court system and majority white politicians, the slave codes are still in effect. The laws will only be pressed and prosecuted against black people. Whites will be seen doing the same thing and it'll just be ignored and overlooked. As a black person, the laws will only be implemented against you. So all these new laws you see being put into place, those laws are for you. They're not for white men. The police are not going to do anything to white men. Just ask Danielle Watts' boyfriend, husband, whatever in the hell he is, overseer. They slapped cuffs on her. But if a crime had been committed, why were they not putting cuffs on him too? Why were they not taking somebody to jail? Why weren't they doing any of that? They were not doing that because that was not their purpose for being there. White supremacy understands that there must be a persistent, ongoing reign of terror. And the way that cop sat up there and told her who's playing the race card. Race card is a way of saying that somebody is making an unfounded racial allegation. That's what you say, you're playing the race card. In other words, you've lost the game, so you're going to try to circumvent the rules by, quote, playing the race card. He exposed himself as a white supremacist right then, right there. TMZ did not say a word about that. They didn't say anything about that. But that was not the point. Harvey Levin got his own supremacist agenda, and it's exposed itself. It's not enough to be free blacks, people. We must be free-thinking blacks, and then free acting, not reacting. But as black people, you have been prohibited from assembling together in a group unless there was a white person present to oversee your activities. If you are seen standing together on a corner, at a store, at a business, the police come up. No loitering! Let's see your ID, all of you! Up against the wall, niggers! Meanwhile, your white counterparts can stand anywhere and everywhere they choose, blocking city streets and sidewalks. And not a word is stated, but they are not public enemy number one. You are. And that's the reason for the difference. One of the biggest of the slave codes was that blacks were prohibited from owning a gun. A slave was not permitted to carry a firearm. Plaxico Burress didn't know that. Plaxico Burress didn't know that he was not permitted by law, by Bloomberg's law, right-wing bigot fiend, arch-fiend, white supremacist fascist Michael Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York City at the time. You see, Plaxico Burress didn't know that he was living under Bloomberg's slave codes. He didn't know that. Oh yes, brothers and sisters, we tie it all together. And I told you all about the story today that came out of the Washington Times that says now the Obama administration, under the auspices of the ATF, now wants to have you mark down your race when you buy a firearm at a gun dealer. That's right, we want to know the Negroes involved. Now, of course, you're going to have media outlets that are going to try to lie to you and say that this is just for the background check and that the information is destroyed immediately upon completion of the background check. Now, if you all believe that mess, you are as crazy as you look. If you really do believe that the government is taking those records and then getting rid of them. You are as stupid as you look. Will someone please tell me what is the penalty for the government agency that is collecting this information if they do not destroy the evidence? Tell me what is the penalty for them if they don't do it. Does somebody go to jail? Does somebody get locked up? What is the penalty if they don't destroy that information? Then what? And oh yeah, by the way, has anybody seen the NRA? Because you see, this regulation was passed under Bill Clinton. Has anybody seen the NRA standing up and saying we object? Because the NRA is supposedly has this reputation for killing anti-gun rights legislation before it can even get started. And yet the NRA is curiously absent and silent. You can't find them. No one can locate them. How can this be? You're the National Rifle Association. You kill gun legislation before it can even get started. How is it that you suddenly wound up silent here? And I thought that the ATF was the biggest enemy of the National Rifle Association. After Waco, it was Wayne LaPierre who referred to the ATF as jackbooted thugs. For those of you too young to remember Waco and David Koresh, when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, an agency that most of us did not even know existed, and here they show up with guns, an agency that was supposed to be just, regulating beer dispensaries, and they show up with guns at David Koresh's place. And Wayne LaPierre said that they were jackbooted thugs. And yet Wayne LaPierre doesn't have a word to say against the jackbooted thugs when they come after black people. Kind of makes you think that maybe the ATF is on the same page as Wayne LaPierre and the NRA. Starting to sound that way to you? Just asking a question here. that I think Mr. LaPierre should answer. Where you at, Wayne? Where you at? That's right, they're coming after your gun rights. You see, a white male can walk into an elementary school, gun down a classroom full of 5-year-olds, and the NRA will immediately take to television and say this is horrible and terrible, but guns didn't have anything to do with this. Do not touch our gun rights. Obama is going after black people's gun rights, and the NRA is totally silent about it. So let me get this straight. White male guns down a bunch of 5-year-olds, the NRA will defend him. Black people are targeted by the government with their gun rights being targeted by the federal administration, and the NRA is totally silent on it. Now you know who's... They believe in Second Amendment rights. They just don't believe in Second Amendment rights for you. These are the slave codes. And these slave codes apply to you. Another slave code said that any slave found guilty of arson, rape of a white woman, or conspiracy to rebel is put to death. However, since slave women were considered chattel, that is property, a white man who raped her was guilty only of a trespass on the master's property. So you see, if you were a black female slave and you were raped by a white man who was not your master, then he was guilty of trespassing, not guilty of rape, because you see, you are property. Therefore, legally, it is impossible for the definition of rape to apply to you. You cannot rape somebody's property, because by definition, the property is still there. A piece of property has no expectation that it cannot be defiled. Defilement is something that only prescribes to a human being. A piece of property cannot suffer defilement. A piece of property cannot suffer defilement of its rights. Only a human being can suffer defilement of its rights. White women are human beings. Black women are not. Therefore, anything that happens to you at the hands of someone other than your master is trespassing on his property. But it's not a defiling of your rights, because you ain't got no rights, nigger whore. But what if the slave master rapes you? Well, by definition, that is impossible. You are a piece of property. He is allowed to utilize his property in any means that he wishes to. You are property. So while you have a vagina, your vagina does not have the same rights as a white woman's. Her vagina is her property. Your vagina is his property. So if you wonder why it is that a police officer can rape 8, 9, 10 black women and nobody says a word, if you wonder why it is that black women can be assaulted by police all over America and nobody says a word, if you wonder why it is that white police can strip black women naked on video in front of the whole damn world and nobody gives a damn, if you wonder why it is that that can occur, that is because you are not people, you are property. And when you pick up the phone with your little petty, infantile, immature, juvenile attitude that I'm weak and I will exercise power over Ray Rice because I'm weak, just understand you are playing into the hands of the people who say that you are property and not people. Just understand you just joined forces with him. And we have an obligation as a people to never let that be forgotten. for the ones who violate that. It should never be forgotten that you did that. Never. It should never be allowed to be forgotten that you did something like that. Never. For the people who want to sit here and play that game. That I can be a that she can be a black female white supremacist. Crystalline Karazine. Crystal Wright. Ain't that amazing? All these crystals. And it's clear as day. It's crystal clear that you're Negro bedwenches and female white supremacists. That's the only thing crystal about you. Now, here is an interesting one about the old slave codes. And this one will resound especially to black males. But to all of us as a people, this will resound to you especially. Slaves were not allowed to dress in a way, quote, above the condition of slaves. Their clothes could only be made from a list of approved coarse fabrics. Did you get that? So as a slave, you could not dress above what the society considered to be clothing befitting a slave. I mean, if you were going to be a slave, you got to look the part. You're not going to be wearing any fine linens if you're a slave. No, not going to be any $200 sneakers for you. You're going to be at the lowest rung of society. You're going to look like you're at the lowest rung of society. And that means you get the worst fabrics, you get the coarsest clothes, you get the most uncomfortable garments. That's what you get. In other words, nobody is going to mistake you for a human being. You are going to wear the slave's dress code. That's right, people. The slave codes even had a dress code. I'm going down the list for you tonight because I want you to understand what the hell was going on and why you seem so damn clueless about it today when you speak anything to the opposite of what you hear here, because you don't have any damn facts. You don't know anything. That's why it's so easy for you to talk like that. They had a list of approved coarse, that is rough, abrasive fabrics that you could wear. If you were a slave, you could only wear a certain type of fabric. You were not allowed to just wear anything. You could only wear certain types of fabrics. But that's all. That's all. So they sat up here and made a list of things that you could wear. Everything right down to what you could wear was strictly enforced. So when you're wearing clothes that look too expensive for you, and here come your good friends at Macy's or Barney's, and they say that belt is too expensive for you, or that purse is too expensive for you, when you're wearing a BMW that looks too expensive for you, you are in possession of something that is not coarse enough, not poor enough, not cheap enough for you. Because you're supposed to have something a lot cheaper. You're doing too much. You're doing too well. That ain't what niggas supposed to wear. That's not what a nigga's supposed to drive. You all thought these were new. The advent of the automobile was strictly another societal device that could be used to measure whether or not you were out of your place. But as you can see here, they started doing it with your clothing a long time ago. your clothing, your house, the school you go to, the car you drive, the jewelry you wear. Oh, yes! We want to make sure there's a certain uniform, a certain outfit that you slaves are supposed to be wearing. And let me make this very clear. If you're black, you're a slave. Just in case there were any misgivings or misunderstandings about that. If you are black, you are slave. When we say slave, that is to be understood that we mean black. Because as I explained to you all before, with the identification and paperwork requirement, that applied to all black people. At any time your card could be pulled. And if they said that they didn't believe that those papers were legitimate, guess what? Off to Solomon Northrop you went. The reason that other people do not go into these details, brothers and sisters, is because they cannot go into these details. They say things, they repeat what Yahoo says, they repeat what ESPN says, they repeat what CNN says, they repeat what the New York Times says, they repeat what all these people say, but they can't disprove it even though it's blatantly false. They just go along with it because they don't know. And the reason why I don't repeat the national media narrative on these things, this person got arrested, this person got detained. The reason I don't repeat it is because I know my enemy. I know my enemy and you don't. There's another slave code that said blacks were prohibited from holding any occupation other than farmer or servant unless they paid an annual tax of $10 to $100. Now, this was the black codes, and that particular code was from South Carolina. Now, this was after slavery was supposedly abolished. But they just made laws that said blacks. Well, fine, we can't have slave laws. We'll just call them black laws. Hell, that's what the hell they were in the first damn place. It said that if you were black, you were prohibited from holding any occupation other than farmer or servant unless you paid an annual tax of $10 to $100. And let me tell you all, back in the 1800s, charging somebody $100 was more equivalent to charging like $3,000 to $5,000 today. So imagine if you wanted to get a new job and somebody said, well, you can hold that job, but you have to pay your taxes are going to go up by $5,000. Imagine that. Well, what about my white co-workers? Oh, no, they don't pay that tax. This is just for you niggers. So what does that do? That makes it where the only job you feel like you should get is as a slave or a servant. Because they're saying that we're going to, you can get a higher paying job, but we're just going to take a bunch of your wages from you if you do get a higher paying job. Well, we'll just circumvent that. Not so easy. Because you have to understand that a lot of these places required you to have written contracts of employment. That's right. If you went to work, you had to have a written contract of employment. Documentation. The Obama administration has done pretty good about wanting to document black males, the black face of white supremacy. In Mississippi, they required blacks to have written evidence that they were employed for the coming year in January. So in January, you had to have documentation that you were going to be employed for the coming year. And if you quit your job before the end of that contract, you'd be forced to forfeit your earlier wages and were subject to arrest. Those were the black codes in Mississippi. Those were the black codes in Mississippi. You notice what these all have in common. These are economic sanctions. These were economic sanctions. All of a sudden, we're not concentrating on one-drop rules anymore so much, but they stayed consistent with white supremacy's focus that we must maintain control of the economy, and black men must never be allowed to compete against us for control of that economy. Why? Because in places like South Carolina, the black population by the time of the Civil War had actually eclipsed the white population. And that was just one state among many where the black population had surpassed the white population. Apartheid is not something that they had just come up with the idea of it recently, folks. The idea that a numerical minority could oppress a numerical majority through their economy is old. Very old. Now, just in case that law saying that you had to work for a certain amount of time, and if you were tried to be more than a farmer or a servant, you had to pay a tax. Just in case there were any white people who thought they were going to come along and help you to circumvent that, they also had what were called anti-enticement laws. What the hell is anti-enticement? Well, you all know what to entice somebody means, so we have anti-enticement. We want to prohibit the enticement of what? Well, what these were intended to do was they basically stated that it was going to punish anyone who offered to give higher wages to a black laborer already under contract. So in other words, once you went to work for somebody, these were laws that punished white people who thought they were going to come along and try to help black folk by paying a higher wage. So in other words, black people were forced into a free economic system, a free market system, and then were being told that, by the way, you are not allowed to participate in it freely. The free part is for everybody else. You're in a market, but it ain't free. And all these laws, by the way, applied in Virginia. So if you all want to know why guys like Mark Levin, and where does Mark Levin broadcast out of? Oh yeah, Virginia. Yeah. You want to know why he talks the way he does? This is where he comes from. This is where the heart and the mentality of that comes from, people. That's where it happens from. So you're a black male, and it seems to be in the culture that they offer good wages to white people, but there's just a natural aversion that there shouldn't be any bidding wars for black men. You can bid top dollar for white men, but you don't bid for black men. You throw the crumbs, you flick the crumbs off the table, but you don't bid for them the way you do for white men. This is an old established practice. But you didn't know that. Now, in another diabolical twist, they also had what were called apprenticeship laws. They called it apprenticeship. They didn't call them servitude laws. They called them apprenticeship laws. Well, what these did was that they forced minors. Sometimes they'd be orphans, or if the courts deemed that your parents were unable to support you. As I've already explained to you, they put together an economic system that makes it impossible for your parents to support you at the level of white folk, and then they can just swoop in and say, oh, we're not going to let you, okay, these are all the rules that prevent you from supporting your children at the level of white people. Oh, what do we know? You're not able to take care of your children properly. Well, we are going to put them in an apprenticeship program under your former slave master. That was what would usually happen. The children were handed over to the former slave masters as unpaid labor, ostensibly under the guise of learning a skill. That's right. By hook, by crook, by anything. Black people were free, quote, free, in name only. Ah, but y'all didn't understand that. Y'all did not understand that. Targeting your children to send into slave labor. This is how you end up with so many young black people living in detention centers, forced and pressed into servitude. Young black men, once they've got you institutionalized, now you stay in prison for the rest of your lives, where they just send you off to work because they started you off at a young age, conditioned you at a young age to do that. Brothers and sisters, we are watching the reincarnation of the slave codes for the 21st century now. This witch hunt, this lynch party that they are using against black males, that the media is undertaking against black males, this is not accidental. They are doing this because they understand. They understand that at this crucial juncture in history, places like Ferguson, black folk didn't do what we usually did. Why? Because social media allowed new voices to be heard. You see, with the previous riots, you had your coon squads go out, the NAACP and the black coon clergy, and all the jigaboons would go out and do their little dance and tell black folk, y'all sit on down now, mass are gonna be good now. They said they're gonna talk to us reverends, and us reverends is gonna negotiate for y'all. So y'all just sit back while us reverends take care of negotiating for all y'all. That's right now, y'all just sit there. We said, you know what? Them white folks set up you reverends so that you would be their agents in black society, and so that you would be their henchmen in black society, that you would do their bidding. You be the black face that would carry out the bidding of white supremacy. We ain't going for that mess no more. Get you damn reverends out the way. We want white supremacy's throat, and we're taking it. And that's why the media narrative this time didn't work, and the story this time didn't work. And they couldn't trot out the NAACP and Messy Jesse and Reverend Al and all the other coon squad. They couldn't trot them out this time. It didn't work. Because the young people of the day came looking for new voices. They came looking for Tariq. They came looking for the Black Channel. They came looking for what we do. That's who they're listening to this time. They're not listening to the usual coon squad. And so this time the demands are different. Out of Ferguson, they came in this time saying money and power. We want control of the city council. We might have overlooked the last 5 elections. We're not overlooking this one. That guy said it best at that last article I showed you all, where he said he opened up the meeting by saying that I came here for the mayor's job. That is a declaration that we know who the problem is. We know it's you, and we want you gone. White supremacy is scared to death now, because if that type of mentality catches hold, that black people understand that it is about power, wealth, and influence, the one thing that the slave codes and plantations and black codes and segregation and Jim Crow and everything else was geared towards, keep preventing us from ever realizing that it's about power, wealth, and influence. That if we ever decided and determined upon that it'd be over for them. And that is why they are now trying to change the national discussion. And I want all of you to do the same thing and say, no! We are not going to change the discussion. The discussion is about white supremacy and its abolition. And we are not going to change the subject to Ray Rice. We are not going to change the subject to sports. We are not going to change the subject to pro football. Them's games. We're not changing the subject. The subject is white supremacy. And that it is time for white supremacy to die a quick and hopefully excruciating death. But we are not going to allow you to divert us and change the subject any longer. We understand what you're doing. You are trying to initiate a new generation of slave codes against us. And you are using your media and your government and your courts and your regulations to do that. You could not beat us on the football field, so you want to beat us in the courtroom. You cannot beat us on the streets, so you want to beat us in the media that you control. And that is why a report came out just a couple of days ago that said that the majority of blacks and Latinos report that they do not trust the media. Wow, I wonder why. After what we've seen, I wonder why the majority of black people do not trust the media. I wonder why. Big surprise, folks. We don't trust the media because we know who our enemies are. Well, some of you are still jigaboons and coons, but a good number of us know who our enemies are. We know who our enemies are. And we're not depending on our enemies to tell us what the truth is. I'm not waiting for the white supremacist media to find religion. I'm not waiting for the white supremacist media to have a come to Jesus moment. They are going to live and die on the side of white supremacy. Even looking up the information on the slave codes, if you all will go and do that, you'll notice that they try to say that the slave codes were initiated in response to black rebellions because slave states became afraid. The only problem with that lie is that that insinuates, or that tries to insinuate, that these states and these colonies were not already passing oppressive laws and regulations against black people already. That somehow everything was okay until the rebellion started, and then that all happened. And that's a damn lie. So you see, it's things like that that make it where we do not trust you. Because common sense makes it impossible to trust you. These are the slave codes of the 21st century. Now, I want to direct my next comments tonight and the next breath of what I want to say here, the majority of that, I want to direct that towards the black men listening here tonight. That's who I want to talk to tonight. Brothers, we are at war. And many of you, as unpleasant as what I'm about to say is, it is the truth. Because most of you who listen to my broadcast are young black men. And you are led by your loins and your hormones. And that is what white supremacy is depending on to trip you up. Because it's not all black women who are doing this to these NFL players, by the way. It's not all black women doing this. But many of you have been enticed by the siren song, and you have attempted to abdicate your responsibilities as men and as leaders, and man and leader is synonymous, and you have attempted to abandon that sacred responsibility so that you can be grown children, so that you can be overgrown babies, so that you can be 20-year-old and 25-year-old and 30-year-old babies and infants looking for a female to suckle you and take care of you for the rest of your days. And I'm saying that you're a damn disgrace to us. If you are a black male who is not interested in leading, you're worthless and useless to us. And you need to understand that white supremacy is one of the most sophisticated organisms on the face of the planet and in the history of creation. It evolves at a frightening pace. It evolves so quickly and so drastically that if you do not recognize that it keeps moving in the same direction, you wouldn't know it was the same organism. It just evolves so radically. 1 minute it's a beetle, the next minute it's a wolf, the next minute it's a bird, the next minute it's a rock. The next minute is a glass of water. It just transforms and mutates on command. But that's camouflage. Notice that that glass of water is still hopping in the same direction. That rock is still rolling in the same direction. That bird still flies. And that wolf still marches in the same direction. And as black males, you have to understand that this is the strategy that is being employed against you now. That they are using the females to come after us, because if they came after us themselves, it would be too obvious and we would wake up too quickly. Why? Because we are already hypersensitive to white racism. We're already hypersensitive to it. So what they are doing is they have wanted to inculcate a culture of Negro bedwenchism among black people. That it'll be the women who come after you. And so you must face the depressing but crucial reality that confronts us today. That it is very likely the female sleeping next to you who is the agent of white supremacy that you must most be on guard for. It is a sad reality, but it is the truth. And based on what we're seeing here today, we have to keep that in mind. That there are just so many black females today whose minds and hearts have been poisoned and co-opted by white supremacy, that they now identify with our oppressors. That they see black men as the enemy. That they know what to say to make you think that, oh, I'm not in league with them. They say all the right words when you're around, but you go through her phone and go through her Facebook and see some of the stuff she co-signs and likes. You ask her about Robin Thicke and see how she responds. Now, I'm telling you that a favorable response just to Robin Thicke or Justin Timberlake, you need to understand that a favorable response to either one of those, that'll get you in jail. I'm not lying and I'm not exaggerating. If you are dealing with a black female who listens to Robin Thicke or Justin Timberlake, don't say I didn't tell you so when she puts you in jail. Just don't say I didn't tell you so. Don't say I didn't tell you so. You see, she let that slip. She let it slip. You see, the problem with Danielle Watts is that you cannot complain about white supremacy when you're sleeping with it. She wants to sleep with white supremacy and then come back to us when her ass is in a crack and say, ain't y'all gonna come rescue me from white supremacy? We're not gonna rescue you from a damn thing. You said you had it under control. You said that those are your people now. So go show us how your peeps gonna do you. And as black men, we make it a habit of overlooking things because we are looking for validation from females and from white society to the extent that we are not even engaging in our own self-preservation anymore. And when they start giving off ominous and obvious warning signs that there is a problem and that she is not as dedicated to this vision of blackness as you and I are, when she starts showing the cracks around the edges and she's showing affinity to things that are obviously counter to us, culture vultures and whatnot, that's that fly in the ointment. When they start showing those little signs that they're not really on board, you're supposed to take that with deadly seriousness. And as black males, we are not doing that because we value a vagina more than our own pride and integrity. And we got a bunch of black males who are now marching off to the gallows, who have been led there by traitors in their own beds of their own color, because this Munchausen syndrome that white daddy has inculcated in so many black females is now being manifest with a ferocity that many of you are simply unprepared for. Black men, if you wish to survive in the 21st century, you must accept the reality that these guys have had a 500-year head start on poisoning your women's minds against you. And that when you say that you are hyper-vigilant against white racism and white supremacy, I am telling you that that hyper-vigilance needs to start in your own bed. From this day forward, you need to understand and recognize the pecking order. And there is no room and no tolerance and no place for a female in your midst who does not respect the pecking order. And if she does not respect your primacy as a black male, as the man, as the leader of his house and his society, if she does not respect that, if she shows even the slightest inkling, if you make a statement about it and she gives even the slightest amount of pushback, the slightest physical gesture, if she rolls her eyes, if she looks at you funny, if she gets silent, if she sounds unsure, if she starts asking a bunch of questions, you drop her and you leave her right there, no questions asked. That is supposed to be a one-strike policy. Well, TBA, shouldn't you explain to somebody? You let somebody else explain it to her. If she's coming to you talking about she's gonna be in your bed, she's supposed to be on board already. If she's not, you leave that heifer on the street until she gets her mind right. But she's not supposed to have access until her head is straight. If it is not, you leave her where you found her. But that is absolutely, positively unbreakable. That is supposed to be a zero tolerance policy. There is never supposed to be an instance that your female sits up here and is telling you that, well, I understand your place as man sometimes, but can't I? Soon as she comes out with the can't I, you can say, can't I carry your ass out the door? Yes, you can. You sure can do that. You most certainly can carry your ass. Absolutely. You can pick up your ass with both hands and haul it out the door. But there will not be an argument, a debate, a negotiation. There can be no compromise. And if you and I are not on the same level, I'm up here and you're down there, we're not on the same level. You got to go. You're not up to speed with me. You go off and be with somebody else, and you go trip up somebody else because he's slower than me. You go and trip him up. You're not tripping me up. Black men have to stop being so addle-brained and so dense, because it's embarrassing at this point. It's just shameful and embarrassing that these hoes are out here practically wearing t-shirts now, and these niggas are still getting put in jail for it. Black men, it is time for you to stop with this damn leniency. A lot of you are raised by single mothers, so you have been indoctrinated into the cult of single motherism, where your mama told you that you were supposed to just excuse a female for everything, and you were supposed to have endless, eternal patience for whatever bullcrap falls out of a female's mouth. And you're supposed to take whatever squawking and whining and complaining she throws out there without complaint. And I'm telling you right now, your mammy is a big, fat, ghetto, busted-face lie. You are not supposed to tolerate even the slightest inkling of dissension. If she wants to push back in debate, tell that heifer go join a collegiate debate team. Tell her go run for Congress. She can go debate all damn day. But in your house, this is not a debate center. We're not a debate team. And if your woman cannot respect the pecking order, then you go send her ass off to some weak-willed Negro who will sit up here and tolerate her nonsense. And when he ends up like Ray Rice, when he ends up like that string of dudes we're just seeing now, behind the damn 8 ball, when he ends up like that, just count your blessings that you weren't like him. Count your blessings. As black men, we have made it too easy for our enemies to come after us, and a lot of cases, the truth be told, your enemy is sitting right in the bed with you. We have made it far too simple for them to come after us, and we have got to put the brakes on that now by raising our standards for ourselves and the quality of people, and specifically females, that we associate with. We must do that now. You cannot have a female around you who subscribes to the slave codes, that a black male cannot defend himself under any circumstances, that a black male is supposed to be treated like a boy. You see, white men won't walk up and try that, so what they do is they've empowered black females to do it, and it is her job to do what white folk used to do, which is to make sure that you stay in a subservient position. So it's not white men coming up and saying you better stay in line, it's your female saying you better stay in line or else. That's a way of intimidating black men. That's a way of trying to subjugate black men and putting us back in that slave plantation boy status. That we're supposed to be these boys on a plantation. That we're not men to be respected. You're just a bunch of boys, and that somebody else can come along and pull your chain and yank you to the ground whenever they want to. But that you have no rights and determination of your own. That's what they're trying to do to us now. To condition us to look down at our feet. That if anybody is upset with us other than another black male, because remember, you cannot exercise power against white people. And they've empowered black females, so since she's their avatar, you can't express any displeasure with her. But with another black male, oh, you'll go to prison for him, because, well, I can fight him. I got a 50-50 chance there. But you will not express these same things with anybody else. That is their way of making you look down at your shoes, scrape your feet. Don't you raise your voice, boy. I'm not gonna sit up here and punk you out today. I'll let this female here. Now he gets out of line. You just call me. You understand, Janae Rice? Yes, sir, boss. I'ma call you right up. He get out of line. Don't you be afraid to put that lash on him, Janae. Sometimes you gotta put him in his place. But remember, he better not buck up to you. If he does, you call me. You got it? Yes, the boss. Gonna be on that phone with you like it ain't nothing. Lickety split lightning quick. Yes, the boss. And now you're seeing it over and over again. To the point now that they're just trying to use these as hold cards now. And as black men, we better wake up and recognize that this is the game, not next year, but they've already opened the trap on us here. You better understand that this is it. It's out there and it's waiting for all of us. Not just in the NFL, but at your job, at your church, at your school, walking down the street, anywhere you go. They're waiting now. That it is open season. That if you catch any unaccompanied black, you notice that it doesn't happen in groups. So as long as a black male is accompanied by other people, he'll be okay. But if they can catch you by yourself, if we can get you where there's no witnesses, well, now we can just do with you what we want now, can't we? Trayvon Martin, you were by yourself, no witnesses. Ha ha ha, gotcha. Jordan Russell Davis, the only problem in that case is there were too many witnesses. They couldn't just ignore it because there were too many witnesses. Michael Brown, they couldn't just ignore it because there were too many witnesses. Oscar Grant couldn't just ignore it, there were too many witnesses. In the case of Sean Bell, they attempted to murder all the witnesses. A lot of you black males do not understand that we are at war. And in warfare, you not only have to know who the enemy is, you have to also be able to identify the tools and the weapons that the enemy uses. And in this case, the enemy is using his chief weapon now is your own woman is being used as the implement of war against you. This has to be interceded and stopped now. I asked a question earlier today, and I want you as black men to consider what I'm about to tell you right now. How much do black men spend on Nikes? I'll give you a minute to look that up. Okay, you may need a little bit more time than that. You may need a little bit more time than that. But think about that for a moment. How much money do black males spend on Nikes? How much do black people spend on liquor? Now, I want us to just take just those two things by themselves. Tennis shoes, liquor. Just those two things on their own, by themselves. Now, if you figure that that number is somewhere around $30 billion. And some estimates will put it higher than that. But I'm just going to take, let's just say the figure of 30 billion so that we know that we're at least dealing with that much money. At least. Think about that for a moment. $30 billion. Now, I have a question for everybody out there right now, especially my football fans. I got a question for you. So between liquor and tennis shoes, we're spending at least $30 billion. How many NFL teams are there? How many NFL teams do they have today? I believe the number is 32. Assuming there haven't been any updates to that I don't know about, though that is totally possible. But as far as I am aware, the number is 32. Now, what is the average cost of an NFL stadium today? What's the average cost of building a brand new NFL stadium? Well, since Jerry Jones detonated the budget cost of building an NFL stadium out of this damn world, the current cost of building an NFL stadium is roughly $1 billion. Now, technically, it's like $1.5 billion, but if you don't put all those crazy bells and whistles on it and try to make it a full-time all year round attraction, then the current cost is $1 billion. It's like 1.5, but you take off some of those bells and whistles and you got about $1 billion of structure there. Because remember, we're dealing with the prime real estate and the biggest real estate markets in America, so off we go. Now I want you to think about that for a moment. $1 billion, 32 teams. So that means $32 billion. If you were to try to build a new stadium for every single NFL team, that's what you'd wind up spending if you had to renovate all of them. Think about that for a moment now. Because remember what I just told you a minute ago. That as black men, if you consider that we may be spending $30 billion a year just on tennis shoes and liquor, think about that for a moment. So you mean to tell me that black men in America, as an aggregate unit, have the ability to purchase in 1 year an NFL stadium for every single team in America? Am I getting that correct now? That just between our shoe and beer money, we waste enough money to purchase a new NFL stadium for every single team in the league. I want that to sink in for you just a moment. While we're begging the NFL and complaining about these people, the NFL is invincible, people. The NFL is invulnerable. Whole nations bow down to the NFL. This is not about hurting the NFL. They're not harming the NFL. The national media is providing cover to the NFL to draw their slaves back into line again. It's not about the NFL. You can't harm them. Do you really think some little crapmeister like Eric Adelson has the ability to harm the Super Bowl? Do you think that one less person is going to tune into the Super Bowl because Eric Adelson doesn't like black men and has a white supremacist vendetta against us? Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that there is one advertiser who paid $2.3 million last year for a Super Bowl commercial spot who's all of a sudden going to say, well, I'm going to give up my slot this year for the Super Bowl because I don't like the way that they handled Ray Rice? Do you really think that's going to happen? Let me tell you right now, if you all really think that with the hand-to-hand combat that goes on every single year for bidding for commercial time during the NFL, if you think that that is somehow going to be interrupted for a second, if you think that the NFL is going to go down on their rates for one moment simply because some whiny little mice over there in the corner are pitching and moaning, you think that's going to happen? You are as stupid as you look. This is not going to hurt the NFL. It's not going to hurt their advertising. It's not going to hurt anything at the NFL. This is going after a specific target. And this is about making sure that it looks and it appears as if there's a rationale for doing these things. And there's only one reason for that, because we as black people do not have our own national media communication infrastructure whereby which we can put Yahoo on trial and do an investigation of Adelson and Yahoo and ESPN and go down the list and put together a televised special or put together a media piece that outlines how these people have been silent about police brutality and are coming out of nowhere with allegations that are months or in some cases years old. And what are the motivations behind this? We don't have a communication infrastructure with which to respond. We don't have that. And because we don't have that, these people are allowed to take swings and shots at you all day and you can't respond. So right now, they are in the process of attempting to do the heinous. Not the impossible, but the heinous. They are trying to divert the world's attention away from the brutality of white supremacy. And instead, over the course of 3 days, how ironic, they ignored Ferguson for 3 days. Over the course of 1 week actually, they have attempted to transform the national conversation about the brutality that whites do to black people, and instead tried to transform the world's attention into the black monster, the black brute, the black menace. The black male menace. That's what they've attempted to do. Understand, every white male in media right now feels like this is it. This is their Waterloo. This is a fight for survival because we have entered the words white supremacy into the national lexicon and we made it stick this time. It's sticking now. It's never stuck before. Now it's sticking. And worse, they're being required to speak about it. And this is why they are all fighting for their lives right now. This is about changing the narrative and changing the conversation, because if black people, and particularly black men, are allowed to gain enough power and influence that we can start calling out white supremacy and, more importantly, finally begin taking it down, that we can transform media companies and whole governments. We can change the government of Ferguson, Missouri. We actually have the opportunity right now to change the government in Ferguson. You're able to overthrow whole governments? Oh, hell no. They came with their feet. We're going to stomp this out. Stomp it out right now. Stomp it out. We're not tolerating any of that. We're not tolerating any of that. We are going to stomp you out right here. You took down Donald Sterling. Now you're going to take down a cop? You see, with white folk, they believe they should be able to kill and murder thousands of us with no problem. White supremacy says that black people's lives are worthless. So the white supremacist structure has said to white society, kill at will. No crime committed against a black person can be considered a crime, because most of your district attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, judges, and politicians are white supremacists. So no crime that a white person commits against us can be considered a crime. Now we have made it a situation where it is being considered a crime, and we're insisting on it as a crime, and there's constant pressure on them. Now all of a sudden they want to do something different. Now they want to change the conversation. And we as black people, and particularly black men, you have an obligation now to not let that occur. Don't you let them sit up here and change the conversation on us now. This is not about NFL players. This is not about girlfriends. This is not about disgruntled baby mamas calling the police because she's going to be getting her last free hoe tickets. This is not about domestic abuse. This is not about your crying ass girlfriend upset because she won't be able to get the NFL meal ticket to pay for any more free red bottoms. This is about white supremacy. This is about white brutality. This is about white monstrosity. This is about white atrocities against black people that have gone unpunished for half a millennium. And that we are now finally taking a realistic stand and demanding the levers of power so that if they will not punish these atrocities against us, we will. You are seeing the formations of activist governments in the interest of black people germinating around the country now. That is what the national conversation for black people is, and we have an obligation to make sure that that stays focused like a laser beam. But there are many among us who are on the side of white supremacy against us. That female in your bed with that "you better do what I say or I'm gonna call them white folks," she's on the side of white supremacy. The jigaboon who says that black men are supposed to look down and shuffle our feet if somebody assaults us, he's in bed with white supremacy. The coons who say that, well, George Zimmerman may have had a good reason for shooting Trayvon Martin, they're in bed with white supremacy. The bastard baby makers who say that the welfare check is your daddy and the state is your daddy, they're in bed with white supremacy. We have to understand who is in league with them. The Clarence Thomases and the coons and frauds and clowns, we have to understand that these are the agents, these are the avatars of white supremacy sitting right here among us, and they want all of us to sit here long enough with them that we buy into the program too, or at the very least you just sit silently. Say nothing. Go along with it. When you see it, you try to rationalize it away and explain it away and make it okay. For the last 500 years, black people have been walking into courtrooms where the only black person in that courtroom was the defendant. And we have been told that there was nothing wrong with that. For half a damn millennium, that there was nothing wrong with the fact that you could be a black person in a southern state arrested by racist cops calling you nigga, and that you could walk into a courtroom and you're the only black person there, and oh, don't worry, you'll get a fair trial. And we were told that that was okay and acceptable. It's the 21st damn century. It's time. Their worst nightmare is that a bigoted white male could wake up and walk into a courtroom where the judge, the jury, the prosecuting attorney, and the bailiffs are all black. And we pat him on the head and say, don't worry, you're gonna get a fair trial. Well, if it was good enough for us, and if you're going to defend those things, then it is good enough for you now. And trying to change the subject, we're not going to tolerate it. Brothers and sisters, they've unleashed the 21st century slave codes on you. Black men understand who the enemy is and where the enemy is, and quite possibly they're right there in your bed with you. It's time to act on that. Stop ignoring it. Black people as a group understand that these are not isolated incidents. What happens to one black person happens to all of us. What they can get away with one black person, whatever rationale they use to get away with it with one black person, will be the rationale that they use to get away with it with all of us. If you sit up here and say that it's okay for a black male to be assaulted by his girlfriend, then what you said is that it's okay for him to be assaulted by the police. And if it's okay for him to be assaulted by the police, then what you just said is that there is no crime that can be committed against a black male that can be considered a crime. That's the problem with you jigaboons and coons who say that it's okay for black men to get beat up by their girlfriends, because what you just said was that there is no crime that can be committed against a black male that can be considered a crime. There is no offense that can be committed against him that can be considered criminal. Now, the reason I catch on to that immediately is because I don't subscribe to coonery and jigaboonery. Some of you, though, are a little slow on the uptake. But when you articulate that argument, that it's okay for police to gun down black males, it's okay for girlfriends to beat up black males, it's okay for strangers to gun down black children, you have just instituted the slave code. You have just reiterated and articulated the slave code. You've just preached the slave code. And you have just exalted the virtues of the slave codes. That's the problem with what you're doing. There's one last point I'd like to touch on here. Brothers and sisters, the national media is not our friend. This seems to be lost with a lot of y'all right now. The national media is not our buddies. They're not our allies. They aren't our friends. The national media is the enemy. And when you walk in their presence, you have to understand that you are walking on hostile ground. They are our adversaries. They are against us. The only reason they want to speak to you is because they're hoping that you will say something that they can go back and use against black people as a group. But they are our enemies. Don't you ever misunderstand that. So when you walk into any situation and you see the national media pointing the finger at another black person, whether it is Ray Rice, Danielle Watts, or Malcolm X, you are supposed to immediately turn to your enemy. You are supposed to look at your enemy and say, what is it you want me to do? And whatever comes out of his mouth next, you are supposed to do the exact opposite. Well, I want you to... Aren't you going to condemn Ray Rice? Aren't you going to condemn these brutes and their domestic violence? You don't want to support that, do you? Aren't you going to condemn them? He's just told you what he wants you to do. He just told you how you are going to empower him. That's what he just told you. He just told you how you are going to empower him. Because you notice he didn't give you any white people to point the finger at. Do you all notice that when white supremacy sticks a microphone in black people's faces, they do not stick it in our faces to ask us how do we feel? Are we upset about white supremacy? They never shove it in our faces to ask us to articulate the case against white supremacy. They stick the microphone in our faces to ask us to articulate the case against one another, but not against white supremacy. They don't give you a white person to point the finger at and say, articulate the case against him. Somebody show me the black person that CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Yahoo has given a microphone to and shown you a video or done an article where they put the microphone in black people's faces and said, tell us about Darren Wilson and why it's been so long since they charged him. They're talking about the NFL's inaction about domestic violence. The NFL in inaction. They're not doing anything. Why did they sit on this for months? Do you notice that they are not saying the same things about Darren Wilson, George Zimmerman, Michael Dunn? We can go down the damn list. They never asked why so long of the inaction in those cases. Sean Bell, the Central Park Five. Where was Eric Adelson to go on a jihad? Nicole Dunker to go on a jihad? Why did they not ask about the years, in the case of the Central Park Five, years of inaction? 20 years of inaction. But they didn't ask those questions about them. They didn't ask why the inaction by the New York Police Department, why the inaction by the New York Mayor's office, why the inaction by the Ferguson City Council, Ferguson Prosecutor, Ferguson Police Department, why the inaction, why all these weeks later, why so much inaction? Can anything save the Ferguson Prosecutor's Office? What can they do to save themselves? Since Yahoo and CNN like to talk about that so much with the NFL, why is it that these people are not battering home the point about, wait a minute, since we're talking about inaction, there's been inaction from white supremacy from 500 damn years, and we can show you just this year 4 instances of it. Marlene Pinnock had the holy hell beat out of her in the middle of a California highway by this white supremacist brute, this barbarian. And yet, the reporters of Yahoo have not asked one time the months of inaction by California Highway Patrol. Why the months of inaction? They have never asked that. Black males, now that they want to gin up a story to divert from white supremacy, now they're saying, why the inaction? But it's only been a few days. So much inaction! But it's been months on these other issues. And we'll come back to that later, nigger. Back to the NFL about you black brutes. Inaction! Why aren't they stringing you up already? White supremacy will never give you a white face and then ask, why has he not been punished sooner? White supremacy will never hold up a white face and then say he needs to be punished faster. Why is it taking so long to punish him? They followed O.J. Simpson around for a decade until he got arrested again. Why is it taking so long to punish him? Why is he still walking the streets free? Why is this travesty of justice still going on? Why is it taking so long to get him? Black men being gunned down. They never asked, why is it taking so long to get George Zimmerman? The national media never asked that, and they never will. Why? Because they are in bed with George Zimmerman. They approve of the actions, but they have to approve of his actions while at the same time appearing that they are not. But it's a fine line to walk. The only way they can appear that they are not approving of his actions is if you do not hold them to the same standard. If you say that it's okay to have a double standard and that they can treat white folk one way but black folk another, this is the way it rolls. No double standards here. I am holding you to the same standard. If a black man is going to get locked up and he can be in jail in 90 days, then white men can get locked up and they need to be in jail in 90 days serving the same sentence. In Durham, A black woman accused 3 white males of rape. Wrongfully, they say. Not only did the white males never do a day of jail time, the media immediately started investigating the black female. They started investigating her. They went into her criminal records. They looked at her past. In other words, they did a thorough investigation. Brian Banks got accused of rape by a black female. The national media never questioned anything. And then we find out later that, by the way, it was false. If you had given her the same scrutiny when she accused Brian Banks that you gave the 3 white men when they were accused, the same thing would have happened. But the point is, the media is in bed with that. The system is working properly when it prosecutes and, more importantly, persecutes black males. This system is engineered for the persecution of black males. Therefore, that is working properly. So when you sit up here and start trying to articulate why it's okay and that, oh, well, it was domestic violence, so it's okay to persecute, you are now in bed with them. It is never okay to persecute. Never. Never. And if nobody else has the guts to say what I just said, I'm saying it. It's never okay to persecute. Now, those 3 white men were released, and not only were they released, they put the prosecutor who tried to prosecute them in jail. Have you ever heard of a black man who was falsely accused of rape? Even after it was proven that it was a lie, did they ever put the prosecutors in jail? Did they ever do jail time? The only time you ever heard of that was when it happened to white men. As black men, they can't make it any more clearer for you. It can't be any more clear. This is not the system going haywire. This is the system working properly. The goal is to put you in jail. Whatever pretense we showed up for is irrelevant. We are working under a system of crimes of opportunity, and it is the call to 911 that presents us with the opportunity to persecute you. That is what makes it look legal. Once we get the call from 911, once that goes in, that's it. Anything else we do to you after that is covered. Because we say we were responding to an emergency. So everything we do after that is covered. It's condoned. It's sanctioned. And whatever happens to you after that, that's just your bad nigga luck. But that 911 call presents us with our crime of opportunity. Once we show up, even if you haven't committed a crime, we'll just keep messing with you until we find something. And if we can't find something, well, we'll make something. Hey, Danielle, where's your ID? Well, I don't have to show you my ID. Yeah, you really do, or you're going in cuffs, baby. We're not worried about your white male over here. One more thing for all the bed wenches out there, for Crystal and Karazine and all of the brain dead, whacked out, mentally brain damaged bed wenches out there. One more thing. Did Danielle Watt's boyfriend, has he ever picked up a microphone in front of the media outlets? Has he ever sat there and said that this was a case of racism and white supremacy? Has he sat there and said that I am a white male and I am telling you all that this was white supremacy at work? Has he yet said that he was treated unfairly by the police by being granted white privilege? Simple question. Did he state that he has been treated unfairly by the police by being granted white privilege on the basis of him being a white male? Since he's so concerned about racism against his woman, and he's so concerned about racism, why is he not saying, I can validate that this was racism because I'm white and I should have been put in cuffs too, and I wasn't. And that is the proof that this was racism. And I'm telling you that this was racist. Did he do that? I'll wait. Anybody? Anybody at all? Is he going to go out there and preach against the evils of white supremacy now? Is he going to go out there and tell everybody that this was a textbook example of white male privilege? And that he is objecting because clearly his girlfriend is a victim of white male privilege? As a white male, is he going to go to bat against white supremacy? He's sitting right there on TV. He's holding her hand. She's sitting up here clinging on to him like a security blanket. Is he going to do that? Is he going to tell them, hey, no. I'm a white male and this was bogus. I'm a white male and I'm telling you, this is bogus. As a white male, I'm telling you that I was given unfair preferential treatment. And that is the proof that this was white supremacy. Is he going to do that? Or did he close ranks? And by the way, I wonder if she even notices it. I wonder if she even knows that that's what he did. I wonder if she even recognizes that that was what he did. They're talking about all these other slights and stuff that he might have done. You know, she's getting put in handcuffs. He's sitting there holding the damn cell phone camera. Only thing I was waiting for him to yell out was World Star Hip Hop. YouTube. Straight to YouTube. But I mean, I have a better one for you, people. It's been days since the incident. Why does he not stand up and say, hey, this was racism? Because I'm a white male and I should have been arrested, but I wasn't. I should have been put in handcuffs. If they thought this was a crime, I should have been put in handcuffs. They were not concerned about me. They were concerned about her. And I'm telling you, as a white person, this was racism. And you know, because I was being subjected to unfair white privilege as a white male. That's the reason they weren't messing with me, because they weren't after me. They saw this as an opportunity to get her. And that white privilege that I was subject to, that's the proof of it. Notice he didn't do that. But you're going to tell me that in the 21st century things are different. But you have to understand, folks, there are a number of us who consider that it's the amount of abuse that they are able to take from white society that is what validates their existence. So she's sitting there tonight, curled up with him, after being made a fool of in front of the world, and with him not lifting a finger to defend her honor even after the fact, not saying anything in her defense, refusing to validate that this is racism. And she's sitting right there because in her mind, if she can take the abuse, then that makes everything okay. Do you all think that she was crying because she was in handcuffs? Or do you think that she was crying because it was white men who did it to her? And up until now, she was under the impression that these guys were on her team. Do you think that that was the case? Because that's the one I'm looking at. I'm looking at the fact that, I understand coonery very well. I debunk it all the time. Perhaps it was the fact that she got her papers that day. But there are a lot more out there like her. And you all better understand that she's the kind of female who would try to enact the slave codes against any one of you at any time. And our tolerance and our taste for individuals doing that kind of mess has got to die. It's got to die now. It's the 21st century, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the slave codes. What you gonna do when your number gets called? Or are you telling yourself that you can hide? Good luck with that one. And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And until next time, brothers and sisters from around the world, remember, black is the future, and the future is uncompromising.